Hey, how's it going?
Justin! Welcome to the Friday Habit. All right. Here we go. Welcome to the Friday Habit with Mark Labriola and Benjamin Manley. The Friday Habit is for small business owners, freelancers, and creatives who are ready to take their business to the next level. Join us as we discover how to apply the strategies we learned to grow our businesses, make more money, and live every day like it's Friday. All right. Justin, we just gave you the cold open.
That's great. I
said we've never done this before. What if we let him into the room and roll the intro and not have those awkward pleasantries where it's like, hey, okay, we're going to record and we're going to talk about this. We're just going to jump right into it.
I dig it, man. Yeah, I'm the perfect person to try that experiment out on because that.
How did it feel? How did it feel? Did you feel a little awkward?
It felt great.
Okay. You feel like
the
you have a
energy
little
was
energy
there right away. Yeah.
Dude, I love your set.
Thanks. Thank you.
Is that AI or is that real? Like now you'd never know. It's like one of those things where it's like, I dropped it into Photoshop and then told it to make me a cool background.
That's the challenge, is that it is actually real. My wife actually did all of this. She went and sourced all of these radios, some of which are transistor radios, which is appropriate.
Cool. Yeah.
And they're just all, this one here behind me was in a, not this exact the model was in a James Bond movie. There's just every once in a while I just move the knobs and push the buttons. Get a little button therapy,
response.
You know? Yeah.
I know. I love that. Yeah, my wife is she's good with this stuff. She does a lot of set design and things like that for us, and you know, she's just got that eye, you know, for the coolness vibe. People walk into our office and they're like, "Wow, this is so welcoming and awesome," and I'm like, "It's my wife."
Yeah, I wish I could have come and checked it out while I was in Denver.
Yeah, that's okay. I was telling Ben, I was like, dude, it's like, you know, I've been thinking for years to go to the podcast movement because it's, you know, one of the biggest podcast, you know, events out there. And it's always been like in LA or some other place. And then like the one time I'm not like on their email list or something like that, I get your email that's like, hey, come visit us. We're in Denver. I'm like, wait, what? You're like, how is this in Denver? And so, you know,
you didn't know about it.
I didn't even know about it. I know. It's like, well, they need to start working on those Instagram, you know, ads and Facebook stuff. They need to tighten those up because I live in Denver and I didn't even know what's going on.
Yeah.
And I needed a guy from Canada to send an email out to say, you know,
to say we're all there. Yeah.
I know.
That's funny about the ad stuff because often I'm like, I don't want to do like, you know, Instagram ads or Facebook ads or whatever. And we don't do any of those ads, but the funny thing is they do work.
Yeah.
Like if you're running an event and
totally.
you can target people in Denver that might be into podcasting and all of a sudden you've got them showing up.
Yeah. Well, Ben's in Lynchburg, Virginia, so he could have flown out here and then we could have, you know, done it together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Next time.
Yeah. It is. Have you folks gone before?
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
But I remember, I want to say maybe it was like 2019 or 18 you spoke at it?
No, I haven't spoken at a podcast movement. I've spoke at a conference podcasting conference in Calgary. Before that, almost all my speaking has been in the startup bootstrapping space. And so I'm actually going in what it will be like 6 weeks. I'm going to Belgium and giving another talk there on how I would build a startup in 2023.
Dude, that's awesome.
If I had to do it all over again. But I didn't even submit a talk to Podcast Movement last year or this year.
Okay.
And I think I'm going to try to start getting in there.
You totally should, you know, because you have a lot of information that you could probably share and stats and other things like that. And then, you know, I mean, you freaking co-started Transistor. So it's like, how cool is that?
I think our experience with Transistor would be helpful. The other thing that surprised me, because I'm still building relationships with this community, is we shared our story as we were building Transistor. Mm-hmm. So we had all of our revenue stats our revenue dashboard was public. And then we had this podcast called Build Your SaaS, where every week John and I would just go through as transparent as we could be and just talk about the experience of building the company. And I was surprised by how many people at the conference had heard the show and had followed the journey and were really kind of invested in our story. Yeah, that perspective I think is unique. Most people keep that stuff under wraps, and for the podcast industry, it was definitely kind of refreshing.
Yeah. Well, I think, especially in the podcast industry, because I feel like, everybody holds their cards really close to their chest about numbers and other things like that, because we're all insecure that we only have 100 downloads a week or something like that. And you want to be like, I'm a loser. And how come I don't have 1 million downloads this month? But it's one of those things that I always tell people. I say, imagine if you had 40 people in a room, and you could talk to those 40 people every single week. Like, that would be a lot of people, that you could communicate ideas to and share things with. And, we have a lot of clients who do podcasting with us, and it's really, I always say it's not really about those downloads. It's really more about targeting a niche audience and then communicating to those people. And you never know what kind of work or business or other opportunities might come from you having that podcast and being able to communicate to that niche. And then the other beautiful thing about podcasts is that it gives you a way to create lots of content, doing one thing. So we're recording video here. So it's okay, now we have video content, we have the audio content. We can then maybe turn this into a blog post. We could, create quote graphics from it. So you're doing one thing, and then you're able to create a lot of different mediums of content to share and put out there. So
yeah. I think it's unlike any other medium in that it does grow slower. Like a podcast audience is typically, it's hard to, on YouTube and TikTok, there's these kind of viral loops and insane distribution that make it likely that you could have a viral moment. But the difference is, even if you had a show, like you said, where just 50 people were listening, if those were the right 50 people, there's a depth that you can develop in, and especially an audio show. I know video is becoming really popular, but audio, like if I'm walking to work and I've decided to share that walk with whoever's in my earbuds at the time, there's something unique about that you don't get in other mediums. The fact that people stick around for 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes. And then if you do, I always look for response rate to podcasts, which is like a term I just made up. And it's not something I track in a spreadsheet. It's just when I release an episode, do I hear about it? Because if somebody's driving home from work and they hear something that resonates with them in some way, and they keep that in their head all the way back from work until they park in their garage, and then they take out their phone and send me an email or a DM or something and say, hey, I listened and this was meaningful to me, or this made me think about something. Or eventually, these response rates can show up in, like for Transistor, we got tons of customers who say, we've been following your story forever, listened to the podcast for years. I was in a meeting and my boss said, hey, we need to start a podcast. And immediately I thought of you folks. So response rate is something that we don't think about very often. And if a TikTok video's primary purpose is just to entertain you for 2 seconds before you swipe, podcasting, I think, has the potential to really impact people in a deeper way, stick with them longer. And you're going to, hopefully, if you're doing a show that is resonating, you're going to get these responses in the days, weeks, and years after you've released the show that can be really meaningful.
Yeah. And I was going to say, when we first started the podcast, whenever we'd get a review, on iTunes, it was like, oh, wow. There's some random person out there who said something positive about our podcast. And that's really encouraging,
Yeah. And think about how much work that takes. It's not like almost every other medium on the internet, you have this immediate feedback mechanism. You can give it a thumbs up right away. You can give it a star rating right away. But podcasting, almost always you're preoccupied when you're listening, and you have to wait before you can react. Which, by the way, maybe is a better model for the internet. Maybe we need more,
Yeah.
more waiting and just let that simmer for a little bit before you give the review. Consider what you're going to say. When John and I were starting Transistor, one of the reasons we chose it is because podcasting felt like slow media. It felt like it wasn't just like, some of the social media, they like demand your attention. They want to be addictive on purpose for the business model. And we liked that podcasting was different. It was just like, it almost forced you to be more mindful and consider kind of, your thoughts. And before you just like knee-jerk react, you can just like let it sit for a bit.
Yeah, and it's one of those platforms too. And I want to go back. I kind of want to hear a little bit more about your journey and your story of how you even got into coding. And you grew up in Canada, and did you always dream about kind of being an entrepreneur or doing your own thing, or was it by accident that you started your business? A lot of our listeners, they're freelancers and creatives and small business owners, and a lot of times we think that we're not able to get to where we want to go, or we're not special enough. But sometimes when we just hear someone's story, it inspires us to say, oh, I'm not so far from where I want to be, and I have what it takes within me to be successful.
Yeah. I did. So I was born in 1980 and in Canada, and in Canada, there was a show that happened after the evening news. And so called Venture, which was all about entrepreneurs. I remember, just these stories of people starting with like multiple credit cards, and it went through all the drama of, what it took to bootstrap something from nothing. And some of the stories ended in success and some of them ended in failure. And I love this show. I used to beg my dad, we would watch the news together. And then, can you imagine that? Watching the news together with your dad? And then
not going to happen these days.
After the news was done, I would beg him to let me watch this show called Venture. And ever since I just kind of was always interested in business. My parents were both in education, but still entrepreneurial in their own way. And I tried different things over the years. In high school, I put on my small town's first rave, and we actually made quite a bit of money from that, and it was really fun. I skipped a lot of grade 12 to plan that out and promote it. And then went to college for business, and during my practicum, worked for a snowboard manufacturing company. And then after that, I'd always wanted to start a snowboard shop. And so we started a few when I was in my early 20s. And that did not go well.
It seems like you need a lot of capital to make a snowboard shop happen, where it's like you have to buy inventory and like have a space.
You know what it actually taught me is there's a few things that it taught me. One is we only know kind of what we've been exposed to. There's this idea of like a shrouded ceiling. So you look up at the ceiling and all you can see is what's around you. But if you could get past that, if you could move past it and see what exists in the world, you would be able to make better decisions. And growing up in a small town, the only entrepreneurs I knew were people who own Main Street shops, lawyers, and real estate agents. Like that was it. And so that's the first thing I think about now. And then the second thing is just every market, every industry, every category has its own dynamics. Dynamics that affect profitability, dynamics that affect how complicated it is to run a business, the number of variables there are. And they all have really like an upper limit of, if you do everything right in the snowboard retail business, you're making between usually about 30% markup on snowboards. And then you have all your fixed costs like employees and lease and insurance and then theft. And so your actual profit margin, most retail shops are lucky if they get 10, 15%.
Right.
I have a friend who runs a coffee shop here in Vernon, and if he does everything right, I think its profit margin's about 10%. And these are actually incredibly sophisticated businesses to run. Like they're complicated. And nobody, not in business school, not growing up, I never had anybody kind of sit down and say, listen, think about this. Every single category, every single type of business has its own dynamics, its own variables. And it turns out local businesses are actually just very complicated to run, have low margins, and have a lot of there's a lot of sophistication to running those businesses.
Right.
Like the amount of sophistication it took to run those snowboard shops is way more than what it takes to run Transistor. Just way less stuff.
Crazy.
You don't have to worry about pre-booking and ordering product. You don't have to worry about cash flow as much. You don't have to worry about theft. You don't have to worry about insurance. There's all of these variables you don't have to think about. So that was a painful experience. I think, we ended up having to remortgage our house to pay off, stuff. And it was not a fun time, but I think without that experience, I wouldn't have learned this lesson, which I now try to share with other people, which is the market you're in will actually determine most of what you experience. It's most of your potential for profit and all those other things. And it also determines what kind of life you're going to have, what kind of challenges you're going to face. Every market has these characteristics. And sometimes we gloss over those things. Like, you want to start a pizza shop. Oh, that's so great. You should start a pizza shop. But starting a pizza shop is actually difficult for a reason. And it's because those are just really, really hard businesses to run compared to, as I kept trying stuff in business, I went into consulting at one point. Consulting, much simpler business with better margins. Still limited by some factors. You're limited by your time and other things, but at least it's simple enough that there's a less margin for error and you can make better money doing it. After the snowboard shops, eventually I got into the software industry around 2008. So I was about 28 years old and worked my way up at a few startups until I was product manager. And then eventually went out on my own. I did some of my own products. I had a course called Marketing for Developers that did really well.
So what is this drive in you to try these? I don't hear you saying I went to go work for KPMG and a Cube and I, did that. What is this drive of trying things and doing stuff?
Yeah, I was hungry. I was I really had a drive that came from, it's hard to describe because I think once you are kind of in it, once you want to figure this problem out of how can you create something from nothing, but also just what makes people buy, what makes one business work and another not.
Was there a financial aspect to it too? An element of you saying I just don't want to get by. I want to potentially try to make a really good living and be in charge of my own.
My wife and I had kids quite young, which I wouldn't recommend.
When you say quite young, are we talking high school, just quite young, or just early 20s?
Yeah, 22.
Okay, yeah, that's quite young.
But I think that what the challenge there is that now I have my oldest kids are 21, 18, and those years are formative years where you're figuring stuff out. And having kids so young, it was okay, I got to figure out this financial stuff right away. And, as many young people in the job market right now are realizing, the job market's tough, especially when you're young. And I'd say it's even worse now. And so when you're having thoughts of okay, how are we going to afford a house? How are we going to afford kids? And how are we going to have the freedom and flexibility that'll give our family a good life? That definitely played into it too, for sure. So I was already interested in business, but then it was business could be a path to eventually getting some margin in our life that we wouldn't be able to get from just a regular job.
Right. So then, getting married young, was your wife pretty supportive then? And like you like starting businesses and doing the snowboard shop and all that kind of stuff? Like, she's like, why won't you just get a normal job?
Yeah. I mean, I think sometimes there was times I probably should have gotten a normal job. And then I did. I worked in the software industry as an employee for quite a few years. I always had that drive though of wanting to do it, but it's, again, I think I don't, it's hard to give advice in this particular area because it was like, we were so young and
it's like ignorance is bliss almost.
In some ways. Yeah. I mean, now I think I can give advice to young people. Like, I think if you don't have dependents, that's a great time to experiment. If you do have dependents, my advice has changed a bit. I think you got to be very careful and mindful about what you risk. And the biggest challenge when you start a business is that you're going to go broke or burn out.
Yep.
And that risk increases and the pressure increases the more people you have depending on you.
Yeah.
And it's not I think we, especially North American culture, sometimes glosses over that because entrepreneurialism is cool now and people, want to encourage people to start
grind,
businesses.
crush.
Grind, crush. And it's, I don't think it's good advice. I think you really want to be careful especially if you have young children.
Yeah.
And it also is, it's situation dependent. Like, it's okay if you have a spouse that says, I don't really want you grinding, like coming home from work and then spending 10 hours a night working on your startup. I'd prefer for you to be present. And whereas another spouse might say, oh, this is great, you should go ahead and do that. So it's dependent on your situation. There's no general advice. But,
and I think your personality too, like what drives you. I know for me, I was doing video production, podcasting, photography, all that kind of stuff on the side, like nights and weekend. I was just working a day job, and I was the director of creative media for this real estate tech startup. And I got laid off the first week of January in 2016. And so at that moment, I was like, all right, like I'm gonna maybe look at turning my side hustle into my full-time thing. And I got 3 kids, I got a mortgage, all this stuff. And I'm thinking like, all right, I have to make this work, And so I kind of hit the ground running and then just made it work. And so I think there's an element too of sometimes, you also want to be mindful of those younger children in your life, that you want to be present and they're like you said, the most formative years of their lives. So you want to be involved and you don't want to make those classic mistakes. You hear of these old entrepreneurs that like, oh, I just was married to my job and I just forgot about my children and my wife and I missed out on all those years. You don't want to end up in that place, but in the same way, you might. In my situation, I felt like those things were the things that motivated me to to win,
Yeah, it's hard because it can be motivating to have, for sure, like having kids and having a young family motivated me to want to do all this. But there's a tension there, which is, I meet a lot of people. I got them in my inbox all the time and they're like, I'm so motivated to do this for my family. And I'm like, but your spouse is clearly saying that this is too much right now.
Yeah, right.
and balancing all that, figuring all that stuff out, it's tricky. Everyone kind of has to do it. I think in the last 5-10 years, I've been a lot more careful about the advice I give instead of like, rah, like go do it. No matter what, you can do it. You got it. It's like, well, it's very possible this thing you're working on isn't going to work.
Yeah.
And if you don't have enough margin in your life, in your relationships, in your finances, in your time, if you don't have enough margin in your life to risk that, to bet that, to make that bet, then maybe you should wait. If you have that margin, then go for it, and expect that it might not work out.
Yeah. Well,
and even with Transistor, I felt like there's times where it's like, man, like if this doesn't work out, it might, we made it through that ring of fire, but I don't want to gloss over the fact that there was a real risk there.
Well, and I'm sure a lot of sacrifice and pain and heartache and all these other kind of things that accompany doing anything great. So at what point did you get into coding?
I've always been into computers.
Okay.
We got our first computer in like 1985.
Like a Radio Shack Tandy or something like that?
First was a VIC-20, a Commodore VIC-20, and then a Radio Shack Tandy 1000.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Played a lot of like Oregon Trail. I got dysentery and died.
Yeah. I was like really into Sierra games like King's Quest and all those games. I've always been in computers. I always struggled with programming, which I tried teaching myself Turbo Pascal when I was a kid. And then when the internet came around, HTML was just so accessible, and it was like instantly it just kind of clicked for me, and I loved building stuff on the web. I'm still to this day not a very good programmer, but the ability to build stuff on the web using little HTML, little CSS, some JavaScript, to me is still incredible. And I've just always been into it. So I would say that on most teams I end up being I'm technically savvy. I have built a lot of I built a lot of stuff, but on most teams I end up being not the main builder. In this case with Transistor, that was my co-founder John. But yeah, I've always been into it, and I think especially for marketing, it's been a real asset because I can build my own stuff. And at Transistor, we treat the marketing site like a web application in the same way that our dashboard and all the tools for podcasters are an application. So our main application is built in Ruby on Rails, and then our marketing site is built with a framework called Laravel, and they're like both fully functional web applications. And when we build out something new for the marketing site, we treat it like a feature. And we can do all sorts of interesting things. Like we're going to be building a lot more free tools, but I have a podcast preview tool that allows you to upload your cover art and see it alongside other cover art in your category, see if it pops or whatever. We have a tool for downloading free music that allows you to like play the track and then heart it and download it. And we're gonna keep building these things out as we move along.
That's awesome. And it kind of keeps things fresh and exciting. And I'm sure that being in a specific like niched industry too, you kind of are able to see where there might be holes or like problems. And then it's like, oh, I have an idea of how to fix this. And that's really invigorating as well.
Yeah. There's two kinds of, you can build free tools that are for marketing, and then you have a paid tool that's for, the business side. And we're trying to do both. We're trying to offer people some free things that are helpful and useful, and hopefully earn their trust to try out Transistor at some point.
Yeah. So let's talk about Transistor a little bit more, because I honestly don't even know how I found it. I think I was tired of Libsyn and Podbean, and all these tools just felt kind of like clunky, and that they were built on a platform in the early 2000s, and then they just tried to Band-Aid it for a decade, to make it like, hey, this is the system. And so I was looking for something that was just new and different, and I stumbled upon Transistor, and it just felt minimal and clean and simple. And also I love podcasting. And so it's like this idea of like, okay, well, I want to have a show, and then, oh, maybe my buddy Ben and I can have a show together. And then it was this idea of like, well, I don't have to spend $20 each show to like have my shows. I can experiment and spin up these shows on the platform and not have any restrictions. And so that was really enticing to me. And so I signed up, and I remember I reached out to you early on because I was speaking at this Remax convention in Chicago, and I was like, hey, can you send me a t-shirt and some stickers? And because I'm going to be speaking and I want to like promote Transistor because I think it's like really awesome. And so you sent me some stickers and a t-shirt.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was so fun.
That was. And so I was just like, fan out of the gate. And so, I try to promote you guys as much as I can. And so I would love to hear a little bit about the idea of starting this business. You kind of mentioned a little bit how you really loved podcasting and you loved this intimateness of it. But what about it was like the next business idea? Like, what were you doing before then? And then you're like, hey, I see a hole here.
Yeah. Yeah. So I started podcasting in 2012. I had a show called Product People that was basically, originally it was going to be for product managers. My friend and I were going to do it together. And then we were like, we just really wanted to talk to startup founders that we admired. And so we pivoted the show to that and just had an amazing experience doing it. Almost every good thing in my life can actually be traced to that show. Not every good thing, but every good thing in my career, I would say.
Yeah, minus your wife and kids and all that stuff. Of course.
But it was, that show was really important. There's just being able to meet people and make connections, and then those connections, So one of the people that was listening to the show was a guy named Chase Reeves, who was in Portland, and he reached out to me and said, I would like you to be on this podcasting panel I'm doing at New Media Expo. And he invited me to go to that. I met a bunch of people from the industry there. And all along, I was getting pitched from people who were building stuff for podcasters. And I was always like, it didn't feel right. It was just, podcasting was very DIY, mostly hobbyists. It was very difficult to, sell them something. They didn't like spending very much money.
Yeah.
And then I met John in 2014, my co-founder. He had built the first version of Simplecast, and he wanted me to try it out. And so I switched some shows to that. And we kept hanging out in the, every year we would go to the same conference together, this conference in Portland called XOXO. Chase Reeves, that same guy, introduced us there. So there's another kind of podcast connection. And then we had built a few projects together. And then around 2016, 2017, I noticed things were starting to change in podcasting. Serial came out, which was this massive like pop culture phenomenon. I have this coffee shop test, which is if you're in the line in a coffee shop, what are people talking about? It's also the chairlift test. Like if you get on a chairlift with somebody and you look over and you ask, you're talking about like what they're into or whatever. It started to shift from people talking about, Netflix shows they liked or apps they had used on their iPhone to podcasts. It was just organically coming up more and more. Statistically, 51% of Americans had listened to a podcast, so it kind of ticked over into the majority of Americans had listened. And a lot of brands were starting podcasts at the time. So all of these factors were kind of in play. I was joining, Nick Qua had started Hot Pod, a newsletter for podcasts, for the podcast industry. And then there was also a forum at the beginning that I was hanging out in as well. And I could just see things are happening here. This is starting to pick up momentum. And then I was talking to John, who was working for Cards Against Humanity at the time. And he said, Cards is thinking about doing a new podcast called the Good News Podcast. And I told him I'd build a little tool that would allow them to, a little podcast hosting tool. And I said, John, maybe we should actually do this. Maybe the podcasting is, the wave of podcasting is at the right time and spot that if we paddled out together, we'd be able to catch this wave. It also felt like, to your point, like a lot of the tools in the space were kind of old and crusty at that point. Like people were kind of looking for something new. And this happens in a lot. When people ask me if there's still potential to build new products or whatever, I'm like, well, there's a lot of categories where the incumbents are just kind of old and crusty and people are just kind of like hungry for something new. They just want something fresh, you know? And so all of these factors kind of came into play. John and I decided, we're going to do this as a business. And we signed partnership agreement in early 2018. John had already built some of it. We just kept working on it like evenings and weekends. I was already like a solopreneur at that point, but John was still working. We recorded the whole project. You can go and listen to it on the Build Your SaaS podcast. SaaS is software as a service. That's what we were building. And we just recorded the whole journey, all the stress, everything. And we launched on August 1st, 2018, actually in the Cards Against Humanity offices. We were like working there on the weekend. And then skipping ahead, by the next year, August 1st, 2019, we were both full-time on Transistor.
That's awesome. Wow. So I must have really found you like right as you guys like crested.
Early. Yeah.
So okay. So now you're started a podcast like software company. How large have you grown? Are you guys now more like a 3-4 person team, or are you?
Yeah, we've grown pretty slowly. I think. Let's see. So 2018, 2019, we're both full time, and then around 2019, we hired Helen just part-time as a part-time contractor to help us with customer success. And customer service is really important to us. Like we have live chat and we try to answer it 24 hours a day. And she was in the UK, and that worked so well that we decided to hire her full-time. So she was our first full-time employee. And then a little while after that, we hired Jason as another engineer. And then just most recently, we hired Josh. We got a lot of J's.
Nice.
We hired Josh as a web developer on the marketing side. So now we're 5 people full-time. And we are hoping to stay about this size.
Yeah.
It's funny, at Podcast Movement, this conference, a lot of our we're friendly with a lot of our competitors, and a lot of them have been following our story, and they just sometimes will say, man, you're at the perfect size. Like just stay there if you can. So I think, 5 to 7, maybe 10 people would be our max, but we're about 5 people. And right now it just feels like that's enough. That's enough people to, and we've only actually hired, we've never hired for growth. Like we've never hired so that we like grow more. We've always hired to make our lives better. So, we hired Helen because I was like answering tickets all the time, and I just wanted some relief from that. And then we hired Jason because we needed more engineering help, so it wasn't all on John's shoulders. And then we hired Josh, so there was more marketing help, so it wasn't, I wasn't trying to build everything on the website myself. And so that's kind of been our hiring philosophy, is just like, let's hire to make our lives better, because we started the business to have a good life. And so we've tried to shape everything around that idea. The product is for customers. The product should give the best possible experience to customers and help them achieve what they want to do. But the company is for us. The company is to give us a good life. And having those two distinctions have been really helpful for us when we make decisions around what are we going to do? Are we going to build this? Are we going to go into this? Are we going to try to take funding and grow super fast or something? We've always just been like, well, in terms of the company, we want to have a good life.
So at what point did you guys decide to go full time? Was it just financially things were rolling along and you were making enough money to where it's like, hey, I think we could pay each other a salary? Like,
yeah, that was always the goal, was to, I had been thinking so much about markets and the power of a good market. And just by the time it came to start Transistor, I wanted to start something that would have the potential to have good margins, good enough growth. Podcasting is not huge, but it was big enough that I was like, I think we could build a nice small business here. And I wanted it to be a healthy business. Like I didn't want, I'd started all the small businesses, like, retail shops, web development shop, videography shop, consulting. I sold this book and course called Marketing Developers for a long time. I'd done all this stuff. And the next bet I took, I wanted the payoff to be worth it. And this is just another thing I've noticed with small business people is that they make they're making these bets and these like arrangements with themselves, not acknowledging that if you're going to go into business for yourself, like it has to be a better payoff than if you were going to have a job. And often what people are looking for is the freedom and flexibility, but unless the kind of economic fundamentals are there, it's hard to sustain the freedom and flexibility. So you can have the freedom and flexibility, but if the economic fundamentals aren't there, eventually, you're going to be stressed out. You're going to be, it's just going to go back into stress and survival mode. And so when we were building Transistor from the beginning, it was like, okay, I think this is a good market. I think this is a good time in the market. I think we have all of this experience, like we're bringing all these things to the table. If we're going to take a swing at this, I want it to feel like a good line drive. Like we've got something here that has the right fundamentals to give us a good life. And from the beginning, we were thinking about that. And so that meant, when we were bootstrapping the infrastructure for the hosting business, which is it's actually hard. It's hard to do, even with Amazon Web Services and all these things. Getting the margins right was a lot of work. And but we cared about it because we wanted to have enough profit margin in the business that we could eventually, after all the hard work, enjoy it a little bit and get to the point where we weren't just constantly in a cycle of, on a hamster wheel. We wanted to feel like, okay, we're going to put some work into this and then there's going to be a payoff. And I think more small business people need to be thinking about it, especially since it's likely you're going to have a lot of bets over the years. And so if you do finally get a bet that gives you a payoff, you want to make sure that you're paying off all of those past bets, right? All of those years in the wilderness where you were giving your time and your energy and making sacrifices and not getting paid as much and all those things. Eventually, you want to be able to get to the point where you have a bet that pays off all those other bets that you made and make those worthwhile as well. And once we got to a certain point, it was just like, okay, yeah, we're both going full time on Transistor. And John was very happy to do that because he was like working the day job and Transistor. That was, you can't do that for very long. And so as soon as we had the money to do it, it was like, yeah, we're going full time. And so that was 2019. So that's 4 years ago.
How have you protected your partnership? You always hear people say like, oh, don't go into business with anybody else, and, it's hard to keep, everybody happy or like, I want to be the person that makes all the decisions and not have to debate with somebody else. Like how have you guys protected your relationship and your business and all that kind of stuff?
I mean, I had tried other partnerships in the past and they hadn't all worked out. I think with John, one significant thing was I'd had this experience before of like an uneven partnership where one of us was like running way faster than the other person. And John was the first time where I felt like I was running at my pace, doing what I was best at. And I looked beside me and there's somebody who's really good at what he does running right alongside me and in tandem. And so having that feeling of, wow, he's really good at building product. And I think I'm good at shaping product. That's kind of where we came together in the middle. But in terms of actually implementing it in a way that was solid infrastructure, well-designed, responsive, performant, like he was just able to take that part, which meant I could just focus all my attention on the things I was good at. And that working in tandem, you could just see it working. It was just like, wow, like
that's exciting.
We're really working with each other. It is hard. It's hard. Any human relationship is hard. Every time you add a new team member, there's challenges there. Human beings, we all have our own emotions. We all have our own stuff going on at home. We all have our own experiences from our past, good and bad, that affect who we are today. It's complicated for sure. It's something that we have to keep working at. So one thing John and I realized is we need to do a founders retreat every year. We didn't do one this year, and it did affect us, I think. Him and I ended up going out to Denver a day early this year to hang out. So we know for our relationship, we need FaceTime. We need just time, him and I, especially when you're a remote team. The people's experience, like when they're in their own office space and all they have is text interaction or some Zoom calls, it's just easy to like get offended easy. It's easy to get misunderstood. It's easy to feel, there's days where I feel like I'm not valuable or whatever. And it's just because there's no immediate feedback. Now there's benefits too, to not all being in the same space. There's pros and cons, but I think for us, what it's meant is we need to have a team retreat every year. So last year we did Montreal for a week, and this year we're doing Nashville for a week. We're leaving in like 10 days or something for that.
Awesome.
And we do our team retreats. It's just like we go hang out, we go for meals, we do some touristy things. We spend a lot of time just together. And as you kind of sit together as humans, it helps rekindle some of the stuff that left. If you don't do it, everything becomes kind of brittle and has the potential to, have a negative impact. So that's what we're trying. And it's, again, working with humans in a team there's nothing easy about it. And a co-founder it's not quite like being married, but there are similarities. It's just, regular phone calls is important. Actually talking about what is on your mind. It's one reason actually the podcast was so helpful, because every week we used to sit down and have these candid conversations, but because the microphones were on, we had to elevate ourselves a bit and be the best versions of ourselves. Right. And in some ways I miss the fact we still do the show maybe once a month, but I miss those, that was really good for us. The other thing that we do that's actually been really good for us is we do our own bookkeeping. We just have it's called, if the IRS ever finds us, they're going to wonder about this, but we have a recurring schedule meeting called Cook the Books every month.
Nice.
And we just get together and we just review our bookkeeping stuff together. And there's something about that that's nice. It's this kind of simple thing. We're just categorizing transactions and what was this and what was this, and it just has been a helpful recurring thing that we do to touch base.
I think that's awesome. And Ben and I, this podcast was born out of we connected for the first time in person. We met in 2014 I think, or 2015, because I hired his company to build a website for a company that I was working with. And so we met virtually because, everything he did was, virtual. And we kind of just hit it off. And I joked it with him about like, oh yeah, you should come to Denver sometime. And he's like, oh, I've always wanted to see it. And then we both went on this business, retreat thing. And we met in person for the first time. And we were just like, buds out of the gate. And then we were like, hey, we should get together like every year. And so we started this thing called Bro Mountain Getaway. And so we head out, somewhere. He was coming to Denver, so we'd head out to the mountain somewhere. And then we just spend a weekend just talking about business and ideas and things like that. And he developed this system called the Friday Habit System. And I was like, man, this would be a great, like the Friday Habit just sounds like a great idea for a podcast, and we could... And so we kind of started talking about that in 2019. And then, yeah, it's one of those things where it's really helped our friendship, one, that we get together almost on a weekly basis to record the show. And then, two, like every year we, for the past 4 years or whatever, have gotten together in person, whether like this year, his whole family went on a epic road trip and, he came through Colorado with his family and we got to hang out and stuff like that. So,
yeah, there's no, I think working remote is great. I love it. I love that we can all live where we want to live, and it gives us all sorts of flexibility. But you need at least once a year, and probably more. You need to get together in real meet space, and there's something about the humanizing of being together that we need, and so that's part of our approach to keeping it all working.
When you were looking into the market, did you guys do much research about how large the market was, like the viability of it, or was it just this gut feeling of, I think we should do something in this space?
Yeah, see, this is a good point. I have this metaphor that business is like surfing, and I think it works well because you have this idea of the market is the wave, and then the business owner is the surfer. So you paddle out for a good wave. If you paddle out for a bad wave, you're going to have a bad ride. If you paddle out for a wave that's too big, you might not make it.
Sand.
You might eat some sand. But there's this other thing about surfing, which is just that surfers show up all the time. They're in the water all the time. They're paddling. They're observing the weather. They get to know a spot. And then they just have an intuitive sense. They develop an intuitive sense of what kind of wave is worth paddling out for. I think you can do research, but what really helped us was time in the water. It was just like we had layers and layers and layers of experience, connections, skills, and resources that helped us understand the podcasting market and also then paddle out for that wave and kind of execute on it. And if you came in cold, even if you had done a bunch of research, you wouldn't be able to outcompete us because we just have all that time in the water that you can't replace that time. And I think my advice is like people need to be seeking out markets, categories, industries, audiences that are interesting to them, and then spend years and years in the water. And then when a wave comes that looks good, you're going to be best positioned to take advantage of it. The surfers who stay home all the time and never go out to the spot miss the good waves. But the surfers who show up every day, even when the waves aren't good, and still spend time in the water and still work on their fundamentals and still build connections and still build skills, when the wave comes, they're ready for it. And there's something about kind of soaking in a space for a long time, developing an aptitude to recognize a good wave, developing the skill set to go paddle out for that wave. But until you've kind of soaked into it, it's hard to understand it. And so I think research in the sense of just years and years of life experience was really what helped us to understand. We understood it, to your point, in our guts, that it was like, there's something happening here. It's all of these observations culminating here in this place. And it's like, wow, okay, now's the time to go after this. It feels right. It's what makes business so hard.
Yeah.
Is I can give the advice and people think it's, prescriptive. And I say, well, and they're like, well, there was like 10 other podcast hosting companies that launched the same year as you. How come, if it's just all about the market and all that stuff, how come they didn't win? And I said, well, likely because they just had not been soaking in it as long. They just didn't understand it as intuitively as we did. And not just podcasting, but we were both tech people. We understood how to build good products. We'd been building products forever. We understood how to ship like really good features. We had been podcasting ourselves. John had built the first version of Simplecast. We had like all of these things that helped us. And any success really ends up being the culmination of all of these factors. It's not just one. It's the culmination of everything at once that produces the success, including the luck and the timing and everything else. And I think that the advice then is to go out and experience some stuff. Go out and get in some waters. Go get involved in a category. Go and get in motion, doing things, being involved, building stuff. And my theory is that as you're in motion, opportunities will present themselves.
So when you launched it, when you put it out there, did you spend like just $1 million advertising, like trying to really like pump it everywhere so it was seen? How did people find it? And I guess from speaking from experience, I Googled it. It was such a clean and simple and enticing product. It was just good that it was easy for me to like sign up for and then share when people were asking me, hey, what platform should I use? Oh, you have to use Transistor. And then right now, whenever someone signs with us, we usually transition them from whatever platform they're on over to Transistor.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That I appreciate that. I don't think we've maybe spent $3,000 on advertising total in our whole company history. So we haven't spent much on paid acquisition yet. Not saying that we shouldn't.
Yeah.
We probably should be, but we haven't done a ton of paid acquisition. The initial customers came from my audience, from our network, from the tech community. We still have quite a few customers from the startup tech software developer world that start podcasts with us. And that was maybe our first, 100 to 250 customers, something like that. And then we started building up other channels along the way. So search engines, people finding our content, putting out lots of content, telling our story. Story has been really powerful for us. It's just like people tell stories. And so we've got pretty good word of mouth. Affiliates is a good channel for us. We have people that have built up sites that get, lots of traffic, and they have reviewed Transistor and they make us one of their picks, but they also get a cut of that recommendation. And then, so search, affiliates, brand, storytelling. That's been a lot of it. It's just, and they all kind of magnify and amplify each other as well. So, I haven't been a huge fan of what's going on Twitter, but I have a pretty big audience there. And so I'm still hesitant to give it up because it's been a good amplifier and magnifier for us. And, we get a new customer like Ali Abdal is a customer, and just having him as a case study is helpful for us. People hear about us through him. People hear about us through the Acquired podcast, which is an amazing kind of hardcore history for businesses. They just switched to us. And so these things kind of all build on top of each other. The nice thing about podcasting is that every day there's thousands of people who wake up around the world who wake up and Google, how do I start a podcast? So there's momentum there that's kind of driving the whole industry that you don't get in some other categories. In some other markets, it really feels like you're always pulling the customer. Whereas in this case, the market has the pull. The market is just pulling people saying, oh yeah, I want to start a podcast. And then it's like, okay, how do I start a podcast? Oh, I need hosting. Best podcast hosting. Oh, here's some options. I'm going to try them out. We get a lot of business just from customer intent. They just like, I want to start a podcast. I need podcast hosting. What's the best podcast hosting? And then hopefully they find Transistor and sign up and try us out. That's generally the funnel.
All right. Yeah. That's wonderful. And I think it's a great example to everyone out there that if you just build something that you're passionate about and that you believe in and that is solving a problem, that you'll have success, you know?
The other lesson there is to build something that people are already searching for. I think that's the best way to put it, because everything else, passion and all those other things, they are necessary but not sufficient for success. What you really need is a product people are already searching for. Yeah, it's like, if we've had someone come by our house that was detailing cars. And it's like, I'm always thinking about like, man, the car's so dirty. I wish I could get someone to clean it up. And having somebody come by and go, hey, I detail cars. And I'm like, okay, let me see your reviews. And I see my buddy Andrew used the same service. I'm like, okay, well, I'm already searching for this. I'm already waiting for something like this. I'm already like wanting this. This desire already exists. And, even better than, having to come to somebody and pitch it on them. If the customer is already taking proactive action, if they're typing something into Google, then there's already a lot of intent there. They're already searching for a solution. And one mistake I see people making is they'll say, here's my idea. And I'll say, who's already searching for that? Or how do you know people are already searching for something like that? And they'll be like, I don't know. I just think it's a good idea. It's like, well, no, you need people already in motion. Our business would not work. We need hundreds of new trials every month to sustain the business. And so we need hundreds of people and really thousands of people, like I said, who are waking up every day and who are searching for something like Transistor. That's the key. And if you don't have that, if you're just, building something that's interesting to you, but people aren't actively looking for, you're going to have a really hard time. You're going to have to be pulling customers to you as opposed to the customers are just coming to you because they already know what they need. They're just looking for the best solution.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. That's so true. Man, I feel like there's a lot more things that I want to talk about. And maybe we just need to save this for like another episode, because there's best practices and, like.
And
just
Ben hasn't talked once this whole time. He's
I'm just sitting here listening. I'm taking notes. I'm learning a lot. I think it's the quietest I've been in a long time.
It is the quietest you've been. You've just been.
I'm just lurking in the corner. Yeah.
Does Ben need a snack? Do you got to send Postmates to Ben?
Well, listen, Ben, I know even though you haven't talked that much this episode, because I have bogarted this conversation and I apologize, but I know you've probably taken a copious amount of notes. So give me your top 5 takeaways from this episode.
Absolutely. So many, but I'll pick just a few. Yeah. One thing you said, Justin, that I'm taking away is that you said the market you choose will often determine your maximum profitability, the challenges you have, and what your life will look like, which key thing. That's like why every time somebody tells me, I want to start a coffee shop, I'm like, sounds like a very idealistic, it's like, oh, that sounds like a great thing. But like the reality, I'm not saying you shouldn't, but the reality is you got to know what you're getting into and what the margins are and stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Have your eyes wide open and be realistic about it.
I loved your hiring philosophy. Don't just hire for growth, hire to make your life better. I think that's awesome because you're really focusing on like the purpose of the business, which is, hey, this is a business to create a good work environment and lifestyle for us and our employees. Makes a ton of sense. I love that you said, if you want to recognize the right wave in the right market, you got to spend more time in the water. And the last one I got here is create a product or service that people are already searching for.
Yeah. Perfect, man.
Good stuff.
Dude, can I borrow Ben for, can Ben just give me a debrief every day?
Yeah, there you go. It's like, what do I got going on? He's the best.
Can we put Ben into an artificial intelligence and just get that productized?
What you didn't know is that Ben is AI.
That's right.
He's deep faked in the basement in Virginia.
Yeah, this is the AI background I created of a basement to look more authentic. Does it look like I'm in a basement?
Exactly.
You're fooling me.
Well, hey, okay, if you could leave one bit of advice for somebody who's looking to start a podcast or wanting to get into podcasting, what would that be?
Oh, it's it's the same principles that apply to product apply to podcasting. So you're creating a show that people want to listen to. You're creating a show that people are searching for. You're creating a show that people are already desiring, like they already desire that it exists. You're just showing up and giving them what they're looking for already. And if you do that and you make it unique, make it compelling. It's like nobody ever wakes up in the morning and says they want to listen to a boring podcast. Make it compelling. However you do that, be creative. That's a good. It'll probably take you multiple tries. That's why you can start multiple podcasts on Transistor, because you can have a bunch of tries in there.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. Yeah, consistency over a long period of time produces results.
It's true. Yeah.
Where can someone connect with you if they want to find out more about what you're into, listen to your podcasts, follow you, sign up for Transistor?
Yeah, I have a personal blog at justinjackson.ca where I've written a lot of this stuff. The podcast is Build Your SaaS, and we have live chat on transistor.fm. So if you want to chat with me or someone else on the team, just pop over there and ask us questions, give us feedback. We'd love to hear from you.
All right. Hey, thanks so much for listening to The Friday Habit. Go to thefridayhabit.com to find show notes for this episode. There you can also find links to our websites and ways to get in touch. And at the bottom of the page, you can download our guide to the Friday Habit system that will show you how to set aside one full day each week dedicated to working on your business instead of in your business.
And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a review in the Apple Podcasts. And if you have a question or a topic you'd like us to cover, send us an email at hello@thefridayhabit.com.
That's right. And until next time, live every day like it's Friday.